Hey guys, this is Nevin K here with the Resist Trump campaign, and you are joining us for Rise and Resist, the official podcast of the campaign. On this campaign, we coach activists to lead lawful, nonviolent civil resistance to Trump and his enablers. And I'm joined today by my co-host Francesca. Francesca, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. As good as you can in the environment that we're living in. But I am doing well. I was just on social media watching the U.S. Hockey team and the drama surrounding all of that. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know why Kash Patel, the FBI director, was in the locker room of the U.S. male hockey team's winning time in the Olympics, but there he was. You would think that he had some other more important things to be doing, something about some files somewhere that needed to be released or looked into.
Yeah, the Epstein files. Something that seems to be on everyone's mind except for Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and the people we're giving our taxes to run our government.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So Epstein files. What's new there? What's new in the world of the Epstein files?
Besides other countries serving justice to people, including the Prince of, of England, and us doing absolutely nothing. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we have no real news here, but in other countries, there are breaking developments continuously happening.
Yeah, I think that you're referring, I guess, to Prince Andrew, who I think was taken into custody, if I'm not mistaken, as well
He was.
as yeah,
He
some other
was.
folks.
And yeah, that if you haven't seen the picture of him in the back of a car getting out of custody, I advise everyone to go look it up. It is exactly what you would assume a man who never ever had any repercussions in his life suddenly getting major ones all at once would look like. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, there we have it. We have some other news to also consider. It looks like Trump's approval has fallen to a new low of 37% ahead of the State of the Union. I guess the State of the Union is happening soon. Is that right?
Yes, it's happening tomorrow
Okay.
on Tuesday night. I don't know if I have the stomach to watch it. I think I'll do my classic recap so I don't have to listen to his voice too much. The 37%, like I can't even find joy to celebrate for anything that is still that high because I'm just so confused as to who are these 37% of people who's like, you know what, I like this. I like everything that's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. I wonder how people do that and they choose to approve him and what sort of news sources they're following. I do have a sense, but I'm not entirely sure. Just kind of scanning the headlines again. It looks like let's see, there was another strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean that killed three. One thing that I've noticed, Francesco, about this regime is that they just seem to ignore public opinion. They seem to ignore, outrage and concern, and they just do what they want. That doesn't seem very democratic to me.
A- Absolutely. I mean, they've taken this concept that they've got a mandate when Trump got elected to do whatever will they have that day without thinking about, okay, well, what did that mandate really mean? Because affordability was part of that mandate, and yet they've completely ignored that. And they've decided to focus on the cruelest, harshest, most violent directives that they assumed they got from the American people and take it more and more outside of the realms of not only legality, but I think humanity.
Yeah. And then I did want to bring people's attention to the ex ICE instructor who testified that the agency slashed officer training and cut vital classes for recruits, which may explain some aspect of how, appalling some of these ICE personnel activities actually are if that they're untrained and given brutal orders. It probably shouldn't be come to anyone's surprise that they are acting in a brutal way.
100%. I mean, all I see all the time is all of these people talking about how much training they need for different occupations that they're in, like hairdressers needing like what was it, like 10 times as long of training than
Yeah.
these ICE agents are getting, and it just makes you feel like not only are we not looking into the backgrounds of these people, which is deeply frightening that we're allowing those who already have a propensity to violence to suddenly be armed and be directed to create more violence on the streets, but that we're not even giving them training to understand what they are doing and the consequences. And that, I mean, that's just a recipe for just absolute chaos.
Yeah. And chaos is, unfortunately, it seems like what we're experiencing. So with that, that like kind of, sad state of the world under Trump, it is, I think a great source of hope for me, and pleasure to bring on a guest that I think can give us a different perspective, about how to think about this situation we're in. One that bring a guest that brings a lot of expertise on nonviolence. So it is my pleasure to introduce Stacie Freasier, who calls herself a non-violentist, and she is a specialist in a number of different areas, including resource development, fundraising, capacity building, and most of all, to me, nonviolence education. Stacie, it is so great to have you on the show. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself that I didn't cover in the few brief words that I just shared?
Mm, thank you. I'm really, really moving in my purpose here to be with you today, which always feels good. So I am, as Nevin mentioned, a nonviolentist, which is a title I recently adopted from Jenna St. David, who is a scholar of nonviolence, and she has a book coming out called the Nonviolent Brain, and it's linking the neuro biology of the practice of nonviolence, and it's good for the nervous system. And one of her arguments is that it actually is within our nature to be nonviolent versus violent, which it goes against, flies in the face of everything I was ever taught in K-12 public education in South Texas. So, yeah, I became a Kingian nonviolence conflict reconciliation trainer in, I believe it was 2002 is when I started my journey with the Selma Center, and I've been fervent in my both learning and then in turn teaching the framework and the principles and the skills, the steps of Kingian nonviolence. And in the context of the United States, the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s is still a fantastic role model and teacher, and offers a rich um, historical archive of tactics, tools, strategies to achieve uh, justice in this country, which has not come to fruition and has been worked on for a long time. Um, in fact, nonviolence goes back to before Common Era. As soon as, and I will bring this up because there's a critical piece here, which is economic injustice, and when as long as economics have been involved and people have been exploited economically, there has been resistance to that economic injustice. And so I think that's what we're living through right now is there is a serious disproportion of wealth in this world, and specific to the United States, we are seeing, we're unfortunately, it seems like leading the way in
Hmm.
bringing this to a head, right, through this
Mhm.
administration and our shared purpose of resisting this administration, resisting Trump and his enablers. And but there is a much larger zoom out, right,
Yeah.
to why we're experiencing what we are. Um, in your intro of some of the current affairs that are happening right now, what's happening in Mexico. I mean, Mexico is burning in many places right now because the head of the one of the large drug cartels was removed, and the U.S. did have involvement in that. And my challenge to everyone, my invitation is to think critically about what you're reading, what you're ingesting, what your sources are. Just sit with it and think, who is reporting this information? What is their motivation? Who is their financial backing? And then try to come up with the larger focus on human dignity and our shared humanity
Mm,
across boundaries. Border wall, hello, right here in Big Bend National Park.
mm,
That's one of our local fights. So that is part of what Dr. King did, right? He was an eclectic thinker. He was a big fan of the Hegelian method, which is take what your opponent's argument is and take what your truth is and synthesize them, because not everything in your opponent's argument is should be thrown out. In
mm,
fact, there is a
mm.
higher shared truth. And if we focus on that, we're going to get somewhere.
You know, that reminds me a lot of the nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg, which is a style of communication for those who don't know. I'm currently getting trained in mediation and conflict coaching under the nonviolent communication umbrella. And one of the reasons I was attracted to it, and I'm really resonating with what you're saying right now, is the concept of having these universal needs. That's the term in the nonviolent communication, and that we all have universal needs that we can all empathize with. And that the form that people take to get those needs met, the tactics that are used, can be tragic, and it can actually do the opposite of what they're really looking for. And that a lot of the communication breakdown is through the tactics used to get those needs met. And as you were saying here, that like one of the greatest ways you can reach understanding is through recognizing what I would call, and the nonviolent communication pedagogy would be a universal need. But as you were just saying there, recognizing those elements of, or truth, those elements that you can find empathy for in the other person. So you can find that connection, that understanding. And something I want to bring up here, and I'd love to have you talk about it, is in nonviolent communication, a lot of the times what you're saying when you're trying to engage with someone that you think so differently about is that you don't have to condone their behavior. You're just trying to understand it, and you're trying to understand them. And I'm wondering if there's something similar in the lines of thinking that you're in.
Yeah, certainly. I think that there are different, and in nonviolence trainings, both at Selma Center specifically, but also with Campaign Nonviolence, and is another a national nonviolence training organization that I am a member of and on staff of. Arriving at our what we have in common versus what is dividing us is certainly a strategy that is oft dismissed. It requires more patience, more empathy, more time, which really doesn't feel like we have any,
Mm.
to take this approach. I also think you were mentioning earlier the 37% approval.
Yeah.
Again, who's the source? Who are these people? Think critically about that figure. Um, I think fear, if we get to the root, I think fear is driving a lot of decisions. And I think that going to tie it back to the economic injustice that I was pointing to earlier, is fear of losing control, fear of insecurity, fear of, at the most basic human level, can be motivating a lot of people to not only be complacent and not rise up against the injustices that we're seeing every hour of every day right now, but even having them continue to invest in this system that is ultimately harming them as well. So I do think that if we can emphasize emotional intelligence, learn about and normalize the concept of healing, mental health, all of these aspects, right, are not clearly not being exhibited by Trump and those who are in power right now. And I argue that it is at its root fear.
Hmm.
I agree, Stacie, and I have a question for you. If you are one of these people and you are feeling the weight of the economic injustice, and there is so much fear in you, and the way that that fear is coming out is anger, frustration, and anger. But you do have that inkling of, okay, I am seeing violence on the street, and it does make me uncomfortable. But I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry. If someone like that came to you while you're in this nonviolence sphere, what would you tell them? What's the path that you would offer them?
Hmm. Well, there is absolutely a place for anger in this, right? Anger, in and of itself, is not negative. Anger is just a feeling, a human experience, right? Anger, when channeled for justice and love, is really powerful.
Yeah.
So, whoever is angry and they come to me saying, I'm angry, I say, great, get into that, sink into your anger, and you get to choose where you're directing your anger. Is it in the pursuit of love or is it in the pursuit of hate and fear? And then
Mm.
there are ways, tangible skills, right? Once you turn that corner to not only acceptance, but even recognition and celebration of anger as a powerful tool.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, I
Fascinating.
think I've encountered a couple of places where anger has been referenced by folks like Marshall Gantz, the storied organizer who worked with several civil, which who was a civil rights leader of his own right. Um, and I think some of the work by the noted scholar Erica Chenoweth seems to draw on the idea that, channeling anger, as you just said, Stacy, into something productive, maybe sprinkled with a little bit of hope, can be a really powerful thing for a movement and for an individual who's looking to get involved.
Certainly. And hope is so interesting. And that's really, I continue to learn and grow. I and I will until I die, right? Till the day I die, I'm going to be deeply curious and continue to grow in my understanding of nonviolence, which is an active resistance, not passivity. And I want to make sure that people understand that because it's commonly confused
Yeah,
with being a pacifist, and it is absolutely not that. Um, Lost my train of thought, but yeah. So hope.
yeah,
I've been seeing, especially from some of my indigenous organizing friends and friends of color who are saying, people of the global majority, who are saying that, y- hope is not a prerequisite for action. And I'm listening to that. And that's a growing edge I have because I one of my Stacyisms that I carry and share to people is hope is a choice. And I do think hope is a choice, but I don't think hope is a prerequisite for action.
mm,
This reminds me of when we were talking earlier when you were bringing up with the um, uh, Keegan nonviolent movements and the different principles that they had. With the last one and the important and a very important one that struck me was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the universe is always just, and something along those lines. And it was that was so helpful for me to hear. It was like deeply comforting. Even just like
Mhm.
hearing it out loud was like, whew, like it gave me a second to have a breath.
mm,
So for folks during the pre huddle here today, I was going through the framework, and principle 6 of nonviolence in the tradition of Dr. King is the universe is on the side of justice. I also find nourishment in that principle. I my what I say to anyone who may be grasping and not finding hope in this moment, and yet still are needing to do something with the rage, right, that's bottled up, to move that into action, is if that works for you, if that plucks at your, heart song, your instrument, then by all means use it. Kingian nonviolence is one of a number of frameworks, right? They're in nonviolence. There's, principled nonviolence, which draws on, and Dr. King was a man of faith and his faith tradition, and he brought that into his work. Um, if that is if you have a faith tradition and that works for you, then by all means draw hope. And I am a hopeful person. I am a spiritual person. And if it doesn't work for you, then take what does, right? Like, take what does. And that is what Dr. King would suggest anyway, because that was his approach. He drew from an eclectic, well of sources. But the common, like, cannot be thrown out, cannot be dismissed aspect of nonviolence and this movement is love.
Mm,
That one is cannot be not chosen. And love is not cheesy romantic Hallmark movie love. Love is much more complex, and Dr. King, focused on that, on the idea of there's filial love, which is brotherly love, which is love for each other. Like, I love you, Francesca, and I love you, Nevin, and it's loving for one another. But he also talks about the sense of agape, which is this universal love.
mhm,
And in Gandhi, it was satyagraha, which is love force, or the bigger, the universal love, right? And that is what I mean when I say love, right? It's
mm.
love in a very broad sense, but love, like anger, is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As to that.
We have covered, some of the stronger emotions: anger, hope, love, that folks, might experience either before, during, or after they're involved in a resistance movement like the one that we're observing today in all over the world, resisting Trump and his enablers. Um, I'm curious a little bit about the value of those emotions, but also in the broader context, Stacie, of the kinds of like relationships that people form when they join a movement or when they bring people in. How can we think about that from like an organizer's point of view or from an activist's point of view, who's just kind of coming into the fold?
Yeah. Well, first of all, everyone is welcome in the movement, and it doesn't matter how many years or days or hours of practice you have. Um, I'll go back to the King's concept of beloved community. The beloved community is, in my mind, those who have studied nonviolence a little longer can ensure the safety of the movement and the collective and the individual who's a baby activist, will say, by bringing that person under their wing and
Mm,
saying, all right, in the context of this moment, we have an action. Well, I'll just throwing a scenario out here. We have an action coming up this Saturday. It is your first time ever participating in any action, and awesome. Welcome. You're welcome. Here is what I need you to understand is we are rooted in the following principles. We are nonviolent. And what that means is we will not engage in violence in this action. Right. So you just give them the most basic briefing. And
mm,
then two, I would say, was when in doubt, come to me or look to me, and perhaps Your role this time is to hold the sign and be a silent observer. And that brings me to a point that I wanted to make sure to make today, which is about what role you play in the movement, what role you play in this moment, in this
Mm,
movement or action. And so that can change over time. And there are a myriad of ways that you can be part of the movement, of the resistance movement and the movement to for justice. And that may be you are the front line because you are able to take more risks in your life, maybe depending on your life situation, depending on your career and your family and a variety of other factors. So you may be that front line who is willing to, put themselves at physical risk, right, or harm's way. You may be a donor. You may just be funding the movement. You may be funding the platform to be able to put out podcasts, right? Information. You could be a weaver. What role that I play in addition to being a trainer is I'm a weaver, right? A movement weaver. And so I'm connecting people to each other and
mm,
resources within this movement, right? And so, if you're interested in learning more about this, a resource that I often point folks to is Deepa Iyer, Deepa Iyer. It's social change ecosystem roles. And you can map yourself in this moment in time. It's like, which roles am I playing right now for our movement, for the movement? And those you can, play multiple roles. Those shift over time, those shift under conditions. So yeah, so I think that there is absolutely room for everyone. Everyone must join. Um, the people power the systems, not the other way around. The system is not a person. We have the power and we can change the system. But expecting the system to serve the people without the people putting in the work is a fallacy.
yeah.
I was also interested because we had done this in our pre-conversation as well, and I want to make sure I get it on this podcast. I was loving what you were talking about, the different hands that you have in the movement and what they represent and symbolize. I was hoping you could talk more about that right now.
Sure. And I actually I am in Engaging Nonviolence 1. Right now I'm sort of proctoring and participating in the course that Campaign Nonviolence is offering. And there's a similar model that's also taught during the Selma Center's Kingian Nonviolence training, and that is it. I like the King Center's way or Selma Center's way of doing which is hand out, fist up, right? So fist up to oppression, fist up to the system, resisting those forces.
Mm,
Hand out is to each other, right?
mm,
And so you can say, I resist what you are doing because it is wrong. It is inhumane, a law. Building a border through jaguar territory country in Big Bend National Park, I say no to that action.
mm,
I also love you, and therefore come, my arm is extended to our common humanity.
mm,
That is a symbolic physical gesture that I think really illustrates what nonviolence is about. So, fist up or hand up against the forces of evil, not the people doing the evil, as Dr.
mm.
King would say.
Sometimes I encounter folks on, let's say, Facebook, who, might be harassing activists that are, trying to integrate into the movement and sharing their joy through like video and things like that. That recently happened, actually. And I tried to engage in a forceful, but also a um, careful way to call out the individual who was harassing the activist that was simply, posting a video of themselves protesting. Um, Facebook is a real cesspool of insanity, but I wonder if it's a place where people can practice the principles of Kingian nonviolence, and I wonder what you think about that.
It is a place that I practice all the time because I will see someone's post and it will fill me with rage. And I want to reply, you beep, 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 right? F you. Like, I want to say that.
Yeah.
And it
Mhm,
doesn't
mhm.
mean that that feeling isn't justified either. However, I am holding into larger awareness some of these principles that I am rooted in. And by regulating at a very like body level, by regulating my nervous system and measuring my reaction and thinking about it, is shame ever a long-term effective motivator?
Mm,
Utilizing empathy, thinking about canceling folks, right?
mm,
Of course, of course, there are outrageous acts that need to be called out, the actions. But I maintain that inviting in a person while calling out their action
mm,
will be more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really resonate with this. This is a strong overlap with NVC, and that like this is why I love the line of like I'm not condoning, I'm trying to understand, because I do think that that anger that you feel of seeing injustice is real and should be honored. I mean, that's a great guider for our morality and how we function as a society, and going further for our society to be just appalled at injustice. But to change it, I agree. Like we've gone down this road of shaming, and what all we've gotten from it are leaders who can't be shamed because they don't feel it. And I think understanding of where they're coming from, and again, to really separate condoning from understanding. It's not saying your actions are justified, or even that I'm willing to tolerate your actions. It's more, but why did you take that action? Where are you coming from? So I can understand you a little more. And if I can offer some empathy and that empathy gives you the space to change, I mean, that's what we're looking for. At least that's what I'm looking for, is that space for you to change. And I think empathy might be one of them. What do you say to that?
Yes. I also, I continue to say practice, right? You're hearing me
Mm-hmm.
use that word nonstop. It is a practice. It is not a perfect. I screw up all the time. I'm a human.
Mm-hmm.
I forgive myself. Move on, right? Like learning how to cultivate self-compassion and forgiveness and even you could be 5 minutes ago that you just shamed someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um okay, so now you know, and now there's another way to try something, right? It's like again, it's the nonviolence is centering the human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that requires separation from the action. And now this is something I'm going to put out for people to chew on because I'm still like, I think I've turned this corner. I have moments of like doubt, but I maintain that nobody can be thrown away. Nobody, right? Brian Stevenson from Equal Justice Initiative, says like a person is worth more than the worst thing they've ever done. I kind of botched that a little bit. Um, and I believe that as a truth
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't believe that as a truth, then I think that some people are irredeemable. Where would that person go if that person and I are intrinsically connected by our common humanity? Like there, I'm also an abolitionist in the terms of incarceration, and that's a radical stance, right? Radical meaning coming from the root, as Angela Davis says. But I don't think that putting people in cages or putting them over there or sending them away or locking them up is going to heal us.
Mm.
our planet, our our common
Mm-hmm.
life together. So this sounds lofty and aspirational, and it is because we haven't achieved it yet, right? We have not
Mm-hmm.
achieved beloved community yet. But I do think that our actions and the practice is finding that nonviolence framework, visiting it often, being honest and accountable to oneself, and asking others in the movement and community to hold you in loving accountability to try this, right? Nonviolence, there are statistics out there, and Erica Chenoweth, you mentioned, Evan, like where nonviolent civil resistance is more successful than violent
Yeah.
resistance,
Yeah.
right?
Substantially
And
more. Yeah.
so it doesn't matter if you're, you know, if you believe in hope or not. But if you want to be effective and you want to see a change because you're angry because of the bullshit that's happening everywhere around us, then try nonviolence as a strategic framework and approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 I loved so much of what you said, and I could talk for hours about almost every single point. I'm going to circle back to the self empathy part there, because I'm so touched by that, and I think for people who are starting to get into the movement but aren't fully there yet, that is a really enticing way to help them make that like extra step of it being like, part of giving empathy to others and doing nonviolence with others is also nonviolence to yourself, is also empathy for yourself. So you don't have to come into this movement perfect and peaceful. You can come into this movement as you are. And as you said, practice. It's just practice.
Yeah, and nonviolence, I'm glad you brought up that point. I will, and I do talk all day, every day about this. So as many times as
We
you
may not
need.
have all day. Just letting you guys know, we
Exactly.
may be running
But
up against
no, we don't. But
our
here's
time.
my point. Nonviolence is not just societal nonviolence. Nonviolence is also to oneself. Nonviolence of the spirit. One of principle and see, I keep looking over this because I literally have a card to remind myself, especially when I'm like, shaken, right, or taken
Mm-hmm.
off center. This is a Selma Center issued card for training, but it principle 5 reads avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
Internal violence of the spirit, that is self-shame, that can be self-criticism. Oh my gosh, I'm the queen of self-criticism, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta work these steps internally to work them externally, and you can do it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, guys, I'm gonna have to take this conversation into a closing chapter. It has been lovely, Stacie, to speak with you today. We explored a number of different topics that I thought were fascinating and that I will be reviewing when I listen to this podcast again later. Folks, Stacie Freasier, again, is, as she mentioned, a Kingian nonviolence trainer and very deeply connected with Campaign Nonviolence, a project of Pache Bene, and the Selma Center for Nonviolence and Reconciliation. Um, we're going to be, excuse me, for Nonviolence, Truth, and Reconciliation. We'll be sharing the links to those websites in the description of the podcast. But thank you once again, Stacie, for joining us today. It's been a real
Thank you,
pleasure to speak
Stacie.
with you.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
absolutely.
And I'll also say my door is open, and I have my own practice. And all of my episodes of Nonviolent Austin Radio Hour and Racism on the Levels, I have two shows and podcasts, are on my own practice, which is C3 Catalyst. So it's the letter C, the number 3 Catalyst. And you can check out all of the archive and anywhere you listen to podcasts by those names of those shows.
Amazing. Thanks
Great.
again, Stacie. We're going to transition now, folks, to just kind of wrapping up the conversation. Francesca, what did you think of our conversation with Stacie? Did that connect with some of your experience in NVC, nonviolent communication? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I every time I get into these conversations, I always think, "Ooh, this could be all afternoon," and I would love to go to this corner and that corner, and and really go for it, like a college student that just discovered philosophy for the first time. You just want to talk about it all the time. So I mean, I absolutely loved it. I really do think that so many of the principles behind all the different nonviolent communication aspects of pedagogies, of movements, of resistance trainings, of all the different ways it comes up, we come back to the same core. I mean, really, and as Stacie was talking about the concept of love and how that's at the core of everything. I kept just thinking like the golden rule and all of the religions, and how it's just, there's just something very universal and at the core, excuse me, of all of these movements, that there can be so much relating to each other that can be found, even if we have like slightly different to majorly different tactics. It can still
Yeah.
come to that same core.
Beautiful. Well, I think we're probably going to be now closing a little bit the episode. So I just want to refer people. You okay, Francesca? um, Francesca's having a little coughing fit. Sorry, guys. I want to refer people to the Selma Center for Nonviolence, Truth, and Reconciliation website, which is at selmacenterfornonviolence.org, and also to Campaign Nonviolence, which is a project of Pace Bene. And you can find it at paceabene.org, and kind of deeper into that website. Folks, this has been a podcast of the Resist Trump campaign. You can find us online at www.resisttrump.us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, Francesca. Are you back?
I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, good. Make sure you take care of yourself. Thanks everyone for joining, and we will see you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys. This was lovely.